How do you help emotionally handle physical pain and illness? If you look at studies involving pain, pain is quite a complicated subject, but we know from psychology that pain is entirely structured and created in the mind first. The mind is designed to perceive how much pain we should feel, and it is in that moment that pain is created. Now, you know this to be true because how many of you have ever stubbed your toe on like a little plug socket, and that hurts more than I remember I was walking through the forest once and somebody had put a nail on the floor. It was like coming out of this log, and I stood on that nail, okay? As in I literally stood on it, went through my shoe. But I didn't know that happened until several, like 1,000 meters down the line, until I looked down, then I felt the pain. But it wasn't as bad as the time I stood on a plug socket and I was on the floor, just in agony. How many of you ever had these moments where you're like, why did that hurt more than it should have hurt? How many know what I'm talking about? And anytime it should have really hurt, such as you broke a bone, you're like, it wasn't that bad. It's because pain is constructed in the mind first. And sometimes the mind, it has glitches where it begins to perceive the plug socket more painful than perhaps getting stabbed. You getting this? How many following so far, by the way? We begin to share the studies involving this. It's fascinating, but it goes back to procrastination. Because how many of you noticed, procrastination is an interesting phenomenon in a sense that procrastination, you know what to do, but you aren't doing what you know. Just wrap your head around that. Isn't that fascinating? As in, you often know what to do, but you aren't doing what you know. So that goes to show it is an unconscious block, not a conscious block. Because consciously you're saying, let me do it, but your mind's like, no. So you're like, let's go, accelerator, but the mind's like, brake, stop, no, yes or no. Yes or no, by the way, if they say yes. So if you think about procrastination, how many of you notice eventually when you take action, you realize it wasn't that bad? True. Yes or no? So in a lot of ways, you'll notice the mind's perception of pain is what makes that event more painful. This is why a wise person once said, we suffer often more in imagination than in actual reality. Following so far, by the way. Now, when they took individuals who were struggling with different traumas, one of which actually involved math phobia, where people get literally triggered by numbers, okay? Accountants tuned in, you probably can't relate since you get very turned on by numbers, huh? Yeah, you know what magazines you're flicking through, numbers, equation, right? Put some romantic music in the background. Anyhow, imagine there are individuals who get really triggered by numbers. And these neuroscientists put them in an MRI scan to scan their brains, and they were all shocked because they discovered this truth. These individuals, when they were shown equations, their brain lit up, the pain. It was like a circuit board, like lighting up in pain. But here's the fascinating part. The moment the neuroscientists and all these psychologists told them to do the equation, all of a sudden, the pain centers in their brain began to subside. It began to calm down. And these psychologists and these experts were looking at each other in shock because they had just discovered a shocking discovery about human behavior. They realized that it was the anticipation of pain that was more painful than the actual task itself. How many of you getting this? So what was making the number, the equation so painful is the fact that they're telling themselves it was going to be painful. Hence why it's so freaking painful. How many of you getting this? And if you think about most people's perception of work, most people, they do believe work to be hard work. If I talk about you pursuing your dreams, most people think it's got to be a hustle, a grind. Think about knowing that your subconscious mind speaks not using linguistics, but visual imagery. What visual imagery do you see when we talk about the grind? Grind is friction, it's burning out. True, by the way, right? It's not a pretty subconscious image you're painting yourself. But that's how most people see themselves when it talks about hard work. They think it's going to be hard. True. Rarely do we think it's going to be a smooth sailing, a time you're going to be enjoying it. So you got to ask you, how much of it is hard because you're seeing it as hard, and how much of it's hard is because it's actually hard.